brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that sends 5% of your monthly plan price to your favorite charity. No contracts, nationwide coverage, risk-free guarantee. Learn more at CharityMobile.com.
Do you ever get the feeling that certain bishops among the high-profile modernists actually are actively trying to destroy belief in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist? I have little reason to trust certain of the bishops who have actively gone after the traditional Mass, or actively have gone after good priests for defending Catholic orthodoxy, or those bishops who have made every excuse to continue Francis's changing of Catholicism into functionally a new religion. It's that new religion that really concerns us today because over the weekend, Cardinal Cupich of Chicago decided to assert the rights of the new religion over Catholicism in his diocese in defiance of something that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are doing that is actually really legitimately good, even if it refuses to address the underlying causes of the problem that the bishops are actually trying to address. That problem is belief in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. The Church teaches that our blessed Lord is truly present in the Eucharist, and yet fewer and fewer Mass-attending Catholics, these are people who go to Mass, who receive the Eucharist, fewer and fewer of them believe in the real presence, and instead accept the notion held by many Protestants that the Eucharist is symbolic. This happened for a number of reasons, including irreverent Masses, communion in the hand, and in general the hierarchy no longer taking the faith seriously. And the U.S. bishops, as a body, launched a new campaign to address this problem, which is unequivocally a good thing. But Cardinal Cupich is now getting in the way of solving the problem. Our story comes to us from Pillar Catholic with this headline: Eucharistic pilgrimage expected to restrict adoration in Chicago Archdiocese. The point of a pilgrimage that they're going on is to remind people of the sacred reality of the Eucharist, which is apparently something that conflicts with the new religion, according to Cardinal Cupich of Chicago. At issue is the exposition of the sacrament, also known as Eucharistic Adoration. It's an ancient Catholic practice, which is probably why Cupich objects to it. What they're going to do is take the Eucharist in a monstrance across the country for all to see, except in Chicago. From the article, quote, "The Archdiocese of Chicago is expected to restrict the exposition of the Eucharist during a national Eucharistic pilgrimage that will traverse the Chicago region next year, ahead of the Eucharistic Congress scheduled for next July. The anticipated restriction comes amid differences of emphasis and approach among U.S. bishops over the Church's Eucharistic revival process, now underway, and the $14 million Eucharistic Congress planned for 2024, especially over the revival's emphasis on the adoration of the Eucharist. While Cardinal Blaise Cupich has argued that an emphasis on adoration could distract from catechesis about the importance of the Mass, Bishop Andrew Cozens has stressed a unified vision between Eucharistic adoration and the worship of God in the Mass, meaning he's emphasizing the Catholic view of the Eucharist and Mass. Anyway, according to 3 senior church officials close to the Eucharistic pilgrimage, the Chicago Archdiocese has told organizers of the Eucharistic pilgrimage that while pilgrims may travel through the Archdiocese during their processional walk to Indianapolis, they are expected to reserve the Eucharist in a ciborium, rather than process with the Eucharist exposed in a monstrance, as the pilgrimage will do in other areas of the country. A source with knowledge of the pilgrimage planning said that when pilgrims traverse through Chicago in the summer of 2024, the Archdiocese will conduct a Mass at Holy Name Cathedral, followed by a Eucharistic procession led by Cardinal Cupich, but that the Eucharist will otherwise be expected to be reserved as pilgrims travel. He told them they could go through Chicago, but they couldn't expose the Blessed Sacrament while they were walking. That seemed to be the compromise that they got about coming at all, according to one senior church official who spoke on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak on the record. Other officials close to the Eucharistic pilgrimage confirmed that account." End quote. To be clear, Cardinal Cupich was against the exposition of the Eucharist and adoration in general. Processions of the Eucharist exposed in a monstrance are, in fact, nothing new in the life of the Church. The practice goes back many centuries. Here are some pictures of recent processions with bishops from the U.S., one from Indiana, the other from Tennessee, and both of these pictures are from the past few years. Why does Cardinal Cupich object? because of the view the synodal Church of the New Advent has about the Mass and the purpose of the Mass. The new vision isn't Christ-centered, and it doesn't bar people from receiving the Eucharist if they have unconfessed sins on their conscience, despite biblical warnings about what happens if you unworthily eat and drink of the sacrament. In the new church, all are welcome, and because no one is truly worthy to receive, no one can be barred from the receiving. That's the thinking. The man-oriented nature of the Mass in the new religion makes it impossible to defend the Eucharist from being unworthily consumed, and to process with the Eucharist in a monstrous reminds us that the Mass is Christ-centered, not man-centered, that there really is truly something holy, meaning separate and taken away, about the Eucharist. Plus, the prelates of the Church these days care far too much about what the world thinks about the Church, and quite frankly, public processions of the Eucharist are just awkward conversation starters. In the eyes of the world, they're really weird. For them, meaning these prelates, it is better to just quietly have that Eucharistic adoration stuff behind closed doors where no one will be embarrassed, and no standing in the eyes of the world will be lost. Bishop Cozens is one of the organizers of the Eucharistic pilgrimage, and honestly, I really like the idea of this pilgrimage the more I think about it. If anyone from the USCCB is seeing this, or if the poor seminarian who is tasked with keeping tabs on me in Rome is paying attention, can we have more of this, please? Here's Bishop Cozens explaining the pilgrimage. Quote, Cozens told the Pillar last year that the pilgrimage is aimed, quote, to invite everyone, young people and whoever wants to pilgrimage with Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament across the country, from 4 sides of the country, praying and seeking their own deeper walk with Jesus as we process the Blessed Sacrament towards Indianapolis. Each pilgrimage will be anchored by a team of young adults committed to walking most of the pilgrimage route to Indianapolis, while sleeping at churches along the way, and traveling with a support van for logistics. Catholics will be invited to accompany the pilgrimage teams as they make their way by foot to Indianapolis. Each team is expected to be accompanied by priests, many of them members of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. Cozens explained that the teams will partner with local dioceses to undertake major processions, with the canopy and cross and servers and people singing hymns and praying and things like that, as they pass through cities along their routes. But for the miles on miles outside of such cities, the teams will be normally undertake either a simple walking procession, a priest or deacon carrying the Blessed Sacrament, and a simple monstrance, but without a canopy and people walking prayerfully, or they will process using a specially designed electric vehicle meant for publicly viewable exposition and adoration of the Eucharist, with pilgrims walking behind and alongside the vehicle. End quote. And I thought I would just do you a favor and show you this vehicle. It's a picture of the electric vehicle in question, and it comes from the Pillar also. It looks a bit like the Pope Mobile, which is fine. But let's focus on closing this out on Cupich's view of the Eucharist, which reflects Francis's vision of a new religion. And I say a new religion because, well, it is, by their own admission. From the article, quote, Church officials close to the pilgrimage, who were not authorized to speak on the record, described Cardinal Cupich as opposed to the Eucharistic pilgrimages, saying the Cardinal has raised objections among bishops about the way the walking pilgrimages might be perceived. You've got to understand, one official told the Pillar. He's reluctant to have this whole affair parading down the middle of his diocese. But while some bishops have spoken publicly to criticize the USCCB's Eucharistic Revival Project or the costs associated with the 2024 Eucharistic Congress, Cupich has not been among them. Along with other bishops, the Cardinal has instead argued that current plans for the Eucharistic Revival focus too much on adoration and Eucharistic piety, and for that reason could diminish a Eucharistic theology, emphasizing the communal nature of Christian worship in the Mass. The Cardinal has written prolifically in recent years to propose his own vision for the Eucharistic Revival, and expressed concern about the role of Eucharistic adoration in the Eucharistic Revival project. The Cardinal published in 2022 a short book, Take, Bless, Break, Share, a strategy for Eucharistic Revival, which addressed Eucharistic adoration. Eucharistic adoration is a legitimate development of piety in the Western Church with many benefits for those who engage in it, Cupich wrote. But although there are many positive elements in Eucharistic adoration, Cardinal added, it can engender, quote, narrowness and even distorted perceptions of the sacrament itself. Without sufficient catechesis, he cautioned. Absent proper catechesis, he warned, quote, Eucharistic adoration can privatize one's relationship to the sacrament and to the Lord himself, overlooking the communitarian dimension of Eucharistic worship and our responsibility to engage with our community in an active way. Cupich has argued that the Church aims to see adoration take place in public liturgical events. The liturgical books that offer the pathway for adoration assume a community context, proclamation of the Word of God, perhaps some music, and a common gathering of the faithful for adoration. Absent that context is the prospect for excessive individualism, the Cardinal argued. Although the prayer associated with adoration can and should be personal, it cannot be merely private and authentically Eucharistic at the same time, he wrote. These concerns about Eucharistic adoration also apply to various forms of popular piety that have a Eucharistic dimension, he cautioned. According to senior sources close to the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cupich has expressed concern, among other bishops, that videos promoting the National Eucharistic Revival have placed too heavy an emphasis on Eucharistic adoration. End quote. Ah yes, bad catechesis, the classic modernist response to authentically Catholic efforts. Sorry if I don't trust anything Cupich says, especially considering that this sounds extremely like something Francis would say, especially that stuff about individualism and communitarian things. Truth be told, the Church has always cautioned against individualism. You should see the works of Pope Leo XIII in the 19th century as just one prime example, though doing so in relation to communal Eucharistic adoration in public is beyond silly. There really is something else going on here. At the very least, Cupich is worried about the love of the world and looking bad in the eyes of the world. That much was made clear from his statement on Eucharistic exposition. But beyond that, I sincerely doubt that Cupich is that worried about belief in the real presence. There's simply no reason to believe that he cares about that at all. But I'm curious what you think about Cupich's statement. Do we have reason to believe that Cupich cares about catechesis and actual Catholic practices? Or is there something else going on? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help, as does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. As always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.